Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. My name's Luke. Today we are doing diary number 6, Music Making Diary. If you are new to the series, you can go back through the playlist and get all the details. But basically, I'm producing a song. I'm not streaming or recording here the actual work being done. I do the work on my own. I work very slowly, and basically I'll pop in. Do a little quick video diary of what's changed this week or in the last few days or at whatever interval since the last time I did this. We're working in Ableton Live, primarily in the box, and just go back and get all the deets about how this all started. What we're going to talk about today is a couple things. We're making progress, all right? So what's going on? The shape of the piece is pretty well finalized. I like the sections that we're in. I like how they repeat, how they flow from one into the other. I'm started, our primary voices is this Rhodes Chroma Polaris sort of brassy synth patch, a Rhodes piano, a Rickenbacker style bass, with some synth embellishments around it, some sort of stabbing, pulsing synth sounds to sort of fill in some of the chordal harmony stuff. There's some embellishment in the high-end sort of sparkly synth space, and then the rhythm stuff is there. If you go back a few videos, I basically used just a quick rhythm loop repeated throughout the entire song that sort of gave me a foundation of what I wanted to build against. Last week I started talking about how I was going to, what I often do will use temporary loops, or perhaps not so temporary, but I'll use loops. Start putting them into the sections to sort of define what's the sort of rhythmic style, feel, groove that I want to happen there. You know, do I want a cut time thing? Do I want a significant change? And so what I've done since the last video is I've put in a lot more. I've fleshed out this rhythm stuff a lot more. And I'm just going to talk about how I do this mechanically. I use a loop library, a tool, an instrument called Stylus RMX from Spectrasonics. It's old, but it's got a big library. It covers a lot of the styles I like. And I'm just going to show you quickly how I go and pull snippets out of that to build out what I want. Now, going forward, what's going to happen probably over the next week or two is I'm going to attempt to build a drum kit that I like the sound of. I'm going for this sort of synth wave sort of style, so I definitely want some of those 80s, the electronic kit toms and things like that in there, but I still like a rock kit, a jazz rock, prog rock sort of fusion-y kit as well. So there's going to be some sort of blending there. You'll hear that here. There's a couple loops that are very much synthwave, but the majority of them are sort of in this prog space. And so what my mechanism is, if I, let's mute this, mute the rhythm here. Project changes. So we talked about, I've got my instruments on their various tracks. They're all color-coded. What I started doing as I move closer to finishing a project, I'll start grouping things. So I've got all sort of the synth highlight stuff here in this highlights grouping. I'll put the primary voices, in this case, the Chroma Polaris and the Rhodes, they're in their own little voice grouping. The bass lives by itself, and then all the rhythm parts sort of live together here. And that's just for convenience, so I can do gross adjustments to an entire group at a time as far as levels are concerned. And then also so I can mute things when I want to just focus on stuff. First of all, let me play you what was the sort of the very simple temp loop that ran throughout the entire thing. Since I started composing this piece, it was like, all right, so that was it. Right. All right. And there is, obviously there's a lot of ambience on there. I've got the stadium style reverb on there, and that comes and goes. I'm not sure. I put enough reverb on my rhythm to put it in a space, be that if I want that to be really in your face, so there's almost nothing on there, if I want to push it back on the soundstage, if I want a larger space. And this is in that sort of prog synthwave vein, so I really want that 80s style stadium sort of reverb, and so that's what's on there. But that loop essentially ran throughout the entire production. And then what I've done I started in the last diary, and I've done a lot more of that here, is I've pulled it out. So if this is that loop, we now have some gaps. We still use it in a lot of places layered, but I've started putting in these different bits from Stylus. So if we go here, what we're looking at is it switches to all right. And we run through, different styles. Here's another one. So I go through the Stylus library. Let me show you what it looks like here. Stylus is a plugin. Stylus RMX. It's old, right? It's old and not cool looking. But it's a really powerful tool, really useful, big library. And basically you walk through it here, actually. And you've got a bunch of different libraries, core library, expansion libraries, and you can add user libraries, third-party libraries. And then within each library, there's sections. And most of my stuff is coming out of this expansion library called Backbeat, which is just a real plain, rock drums. So we're looking at, literally that's what I'm using here. And there are fills. And you can sequence. You basically sequence these loops within the tool itself by playing notes on the keyboard. You could tell it, okay, I'm going to send you a C3, and that means I want you to play this loop. When I play C#3, I want you to play this loop. It's a lot like key switching on samplers. And this is what I do. And I basically run through this library looking for things that fit, looking for things that sort of work for me, and I pull them out. Now, what I do, mechanically, what I do is within Stylus, when you've got a particular one you like, you just drag out a MIDI clip. You literally drag it out and you put it on the track. And this MIDI clip will have Stylus play that rhythm part, okay? And then what I do to turn it to audio is I literally just freeze the track. And then I've added these are audio tracks, prints and more prints. And it's printed audio. So once this track is frozen, in Ableton at least, you literally just option drag this clip down into the audio track. And it copies that audio over. And then you go back to the Stylus track and you unfreeze it and delete this and move on to the next section. So all of these little clips are prints that were a little MIDI clip here that I printed to audio and started pulling them out. All right, so let's just demo some of the things that are going to appear in here. So here we've got this. Right, very much Art of Noise. I like that when I first heard that. It's like, oh, that sounds like totally like 80s, Akai S900, S950 sampling from like Art of Noise. So I totally grabbed that and then layered some hi-hats on top of it. We've got this going. Right, this is very synthwave. And I think I played this for you guys last week. This has got the little synthwave electronic kit toms at the end that I was laughing so hard about. It's great. And then we go back to, we move through Backbeat. So all of these sections, these loops line up for sections. So whenever there's a song's story change, I generally change up the rhythm. Now these are all just they're intended to be temp. Like I'm going to eventually go back through here and translate these into the MPE prog kit that I've got loaded currently. And I may or may not remove the temp track. It really just depends on whether I like the layering and whether I can perform the drum part. I'm not a very good finger drummer, but I have no problem programming. So what I'll do often is try and copy what's happening in these clips, but using a kit of my own. And then embellish it, right? You'll see more of that. That'll be in the next diary. The point of this one right now is I've got these kits, these loops laid out to match the sections of the song. All right, and they get they get crazy. I think I played this one for you last week. Right, so real bombastic in places. So really, that's what's progressed this week from a rhythm perspective. I've gone in, I've pulled out my my sort of placeholder rhythmic part that we use to write the piece itself, and start putting in loops that are more appropriate for what I'm trying to do in any given section. All right, and then next week or the week after, I will attempt to translate these loops into my own custom rhythm track on the kit that I'm building. So your mileage may vary. We'll see where that goes. But that's my approach to that. All right. So what else is going on since the last time we spoke? We started playing with mixing down just a little bit. I should say mixing down. We started playing with levels. When I compose, I want everything to be about equal, right? But now we're getting to the point where I'm trying to have specific voices, like the chroma polaris and the Rhodes, be accentuated at different points in time. Okay, and sometimes that's simply that one's not playing while the other one is. But sometimes when they're layered, I will want to move them around. So, for example, if we go here to section D here, I'm just gonna play a few bars of this. What's happening is the chroma polaris for the first two sections for first two parts of this first half, I want the chroma polaris to be sort of on top with the Rhodes below it underneath. But then I want them to swap positions. Okay, let me play this for you. So the horns on top, now they swap. All right, so I don't know if that was, depending on your particular ear, you might think that was a subtle difference, or you may think that was a ham-handed, working with a sledgehammer kind of change. And really, it is very simple. It's just automation of a gain plugin on these things. So if I pull these out a bit. Now you'll notice I'm not automating the mixer. I'm automating a gain utility plugin here. So let's zoom in on this. And let's look at the Rhodes. Okay, so these are the MIDI notes that are happening. And there we go. So what's happening is, this is the horn part, right? It's trucking along here at -3 dB for the first half, and then I bring it down, right, to about -8 dB. So I pull it down 5 decibels, and then slowly let it climb back up to the end, back to 3 dB. Now the Rhodes part is starting low, starting at 0 here on the gain control. And then I push it up 4 decibels to sort of like bring it out. So I'm going to play that again. Actually, I'll start it here. Here we go. All right. So this is something that I've been doing this week. I've been going through with these two voices and deciding where do I want one to be more prominent than the other. And then at the end of the chain of each of these instruments, I've put a utility plugin, and I'm using an envelope to manipulate its gain. Okay. And I got into a friendly discussion with one of my patrons on Discord. Hey, Garen. When we were talking about, he was working on a project where he was automating the channel fader, basically. And he was doing a project where he was doing a lot of manipulation of the channel fader through automated means. It was cool. But for me, that's not working on a project like this. I avoid touching the faders as much as possible. As far as automation, I do not want to automate the faders at all. I will always stick a gain plugin at the end of the chain and automate that with my envelopes rather than automating the channel fader. And the reason I do that, and so feel free to comment on whether this is stupid or not, but from my perspective, I want the channel faders for high level manipulation of the overall level of the instrument within the entire piece, right? I want access to those faders to pull them up, bring them down. I want to, it's like, oh, I want to tweak this a little bit. And when I'm auditioning the piece, I'll keep my hand on that fader and play with the level of that instrument for, during any given section. And if I decide in that section, I really prefer that instrument up or down a certain amount, I won't automate the fader for that. I will then automate the gain plug in there, because then later, when I'm trying to truly mix down or master the piece, although we'll talk about that in a minute. I really don't do my own mastering. Or when I do, it's terrible. But I like to have those faders available so I can manipulate them, right? And if I've automated the fader, it's going to fight me in places, and I don't want that. So that's what I do. Your mileage may vary. So I stick a utility plugin at the end of the chain, and I automate the gain. If any given clip wants to tweak levels, I'll do it that way as opposed to doing the fader. All right, what else? Let's see. So that has changed. I've done a lot of leveling on some of these synth elements here. So I've got this grouping here that I just call highlights, right? Highlights are, all right, so I've got this pad. Right. So that's pads just doing some chords, like little stabs, kind of comping, right? I've got a auto pan moving it around. Right, and that's sort of filling in what's happening in this section. So I've been messing with the synths in the system, sort of playing with this. I had a different patch selected for that last week, and even a completely different part, but it ended up getting binned. I didn't care for it. I prefer this. So here, that might be a little on the low side. I might bring it up just a decibel, right? And it's easier for me to just go over to the channel fader and say bump it a decibel, as opposed to if that was automated, I couldn't do that. It would be a pain in the ass. Anyway, I'd have to reach into the envelope, which means zooming in and dealing with it. But so I've been going through automating the synth parts, finding more sections that I'm interested in. Here's another one here. Right, and that synth plays again here, but much higher. Real quiet. And what happens at the end of this, I automate the gain to bring it out really loud. Like that. I just want a little accent there. What that sounds like in context is like this. So you've got some of that sparkle underneath it all, but it's real subtle in the background. Although when it's low, it might be a little too low. I might bring it up a bit, but I want that sudden wah, that sort of swell whoosh during that repetition. It's just yet another technique that I do, right? I go through, and synths for me are core, but the embellishment synths are a lot of fun too, the highlights, things like that. Like, let's do this one. Our promenade section at the beginning and the end sort of bookmark the piece, or bookend the piece. So we've got this going on. So that that sort of fire engine sort of dee 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 dee. If you're doing synth programming and you use LFOs a lot, you like modulating things with LFOs. For a long time, I would just look at triangles and sine waves. I just wouldn't use square wave LFOs almost ever. But from adding a rhythmic texture perspective, that's what that is. It's a square LFO that's playing with the pitch of that oscillator. And they're great. So there's a very small micro tip. If you're looking for something new in your sound design space and you're not using square waves with your low frequency oscillators, give it a shot. It does interesting things. Let's see. I think this is it. I'm going to be a real quick one this week. So the bulk of the work was selecting loops and finding ones that work from a story perspective, playing with levels of voices, trying to bring out certain voices in certain spaces, and really, that's pretty much about it. The next step is going to be taking these rhythm parts, trying to turn them into a custom rhythm part. I'm happy with the voicings. I'm happy with what's happening here from a story perspective. It's definitely my style of music. It's pretty busy, and I'm really happy with it. So this is the first track on the next album, and we'll see where it goes. So hey, that's about it. I'm going to actually play this, what I've got here, in its entirety here. It's about 6 minutes long, but I'm going to close this out and then I'll play it, and we'll put a bookmark in for it. So if you want to listen to it, you can. It isn't done, obviously, but you can at least hear the composition. And thanks for your time, okay? I'll see you next time. And as always, you've been watching Synth Seeker. Have a great day.